lunch.
Sausage and chips, pasta and sauce, and tomato soup and a roll.
On a truly massive scale.
All the kids' faces, they know it's coming.
Millions of children fed for free by volunteers and businesses across the country.
The local community, as soon as I put the appeal out, they've all shot forward to help.
Prompted by a young footballer and piling the pressure on the Prime Minister himself.
We should be looking after families of the vulnerable, most vulnerable, the neediest right now.
Danielle and her 3 children, the sort of family the Prime Minister is talking about. Hit by the 2-child benefit cap, she says every month is a struggle. Free meals during half-term from local cafes because of the Rashford campaign were a lifesaver.
It's amazing, especially as they're in this hard time as well. I mean, it's not just us living it, it's them as well, because no one's going out to their businesses and no one's sitting in the restaurants, and so they're not getting that sort of money.
She's as grateful, she says, for the fact people seem less judgmental now, after years when she believes families like hers were branded as scroungers.
It hurt, it really hurt, because it's like the whole nation thinks that of you, and I didn't think that of myself. I didn't want to think that of myself, but it was like a, oh my God, like realisation of what everyone must think of me.
Marcus Rashford's campaign has forced 2 government U-turns, and it's also undoubtedly lifted some of the stigma which clings to families who are struggling to feed their children. But it's also put a spotlight on an uncomfortable question for the government and perhaps the rest of us. Why are so many families in need? Campaigners say this is a critical moment, that the huge outpouring of compassion and generosity from individuals and small businesses themselves fighting to survive must now turn into more permanent structured support from government itself. That it's time to look again at the benefit system. The last major reform of welfare came from the coalition government, in part backed by Labour, and came with tough messaging about balancing the books after the crash of 2008.
Where is the fairness, we ask, for the shift worker, leaving home in the dark hours of the early morning, who looks up at the closed blinds of their next-door neighbour, sleeping off a life on benefits?
Taking more money from the man who goes out to work long hours every single day so the family next door can go on living a life on benefits without working. Is that fair?
It proved a popular message with much of the public too. In 2013, almost 40% of people thought benefits were too high. And as the use of food banks began to soar, campaigners said it was the benefit cuts which had left too many families unable to feed their children long before the pandemic.
I'm a mother, I should be able to look after my family properly, not have to beg.
It was bread or bus fare, it was milk or bus fare.
I can't say enough how ashamed I am already without being made to feel even worse.
In an exclusive poll for Channel 4 News, we asked just how far public support for extra help for families might stretch. 80% of the public support providing meal vouchers to entitled families during the holidays while the pandemic continues. 56% support the vouchers being put permanently in place. But only a third of people support an increase in benefits for families with children. Do you see any contradiction in people making donations? Why do you think we're willing to do that and perhaps not willing to argue for higher levels of benefit, more generous benefits?
It's a feel-good factor, isn't it? Everyone wants to feel good in that moment, and it's in it, and we need that we need that compassion in this particular time. And what needs to change in the long term is reform to benefits. It's not about the fact that they haven't got food in their cupboard, but the fact that they haven't got money to go and buy the food.
Off you go then, see you later.
Danielle didn't receive the temporary uplift to universal credit because of the benefit cap. She says lifting the cap altogether or providing more generous benefits longer term would help her provide for her children until she can go back to work.
I wouldn't have to rely on Charities to help me with nappies and baby wipes and just silly things like socks. Winter clothing now, I'm going to have to also try and figure out how I'm going to get all that and all stuff like that on. It would make things so much easier.
You show me how you do your roly-polies? Yeah.
The government has pledged £400 million to help poorer families get through this winter.
What about your ninja moves?
For Danielle and millions like her, the question is, what happens after that? Well, joining me now are the Labour MP Siobhan McDonagh, who supported the extension of free school meal provision during the school holidays, and the Conservative MP Danny Kruger, who voted against the Labour motion in Parliament last month. Danny Kruger, the fact that Marcus Rashford's campaign was rooted in his own experience growing up tells us that families have been struggling to feed their children long before the pandemic, and the truth is many will struggle long after the pandemic. Isn't the only logical solution increasing benefits?
Well, I don't think so, because we know that benefits on their own are inadequate. I mean, I'm not opposing the idea of a benefit raise. The Chancellor has to consider how to best use the public finances to support the whole country, and it might be that increasing welfare is part of that package. But we need a lot more than that. I spent 10 years working with families in disadvantage, people who've been through the criminal justice system, people who are suffering all sorts of difficulties. And I know that benefits on their own were not adequate, because we need more than money. And why I voted against that proposal from Labour a few weeks ago was not because I want in any way to deprive families of what they need. On the contrary, I want, and what we saw councils do around the country, is to put support directly into the pockets of the people who need it. We enabled that through grants to local councils. And crucially, and most importantly, we need a package of support for those families that helps them get through the hard times they're in. For some families, it's just cash, but for many more, for those in long-term unemployment and disadvantage, they need communities to get around them, which is what we've seen through this crisis, which is what's so encouraging.
Exactly, and you mentioned communities and volunteers, but I just wonder, the number of Trussell Trust food banks has gone up from 50 to nearly 1,500, and there are many other independent food banks in churches and even in schools. That isn't a sign that the benefit system is working, is it?
No, and the benefit system is not the whole answer. We want people to get out of poverty, and the way to do that is to grow our economy, to create jobs, to ensure that people have the skills to access them, and the social capital and the social support that they need for it. So it's a whole solution. It's not just about how much money we can give to poorer families. It's how is our economy performing, and how strong are our communities. And through this crisis, communities have stepped up in the most amazing way, and we need to back that rather than thinking that the whole solution depends on government.
Siobhan McDonagh, only 33% of people in our YouGov poll there supported increasing benefits. Danny Kruger is right. It's not just about that, is it?
Well, no, you don't solve a problem by increasing benefits at all, but it's an important first step. I mean, we've seen a 90% increase in the number of people on universal credit because of the pandemic. So many, many more people who never thought they'd be on a means-tested benefit find themselves there, and I think they probably are shocked at just how low they are.
But are you surprised by what seems on the surface of it to be a contradiction between all of these people and volunteers and small cafes who are at the brink of struggling to survive themselves, this outpouring of compassion and generosity, but it maybe doesn't translate into the idea that benefits need to increase? That's difficult politically for you, isn't it?
Well, I'm not sure that it's so difficult so much as, we've had a period of demonising benefits, and clearly you want a system where people, if they can work, should go to work. But we're about to enter a time, probably a double-dip recession, where so many people will be losing their jobs. I think we're going to have a reassessment by all of us of how the benefit system works.
And Danny Kruger, just really on some very specific points that we know a lot of campaigners have been asking for, will you be pressing the government to make sure that £20 uplift that people on universal credit have seen not only stays for them, but that it extends to 1.5 million people on legacy benefits who haven't had that uplift and are really struggling?
Well, let's see. I mean, I agree with Melanie that we do need a review of the way the benefit system is working, given the pandemic and given our entrenched challenges. But I'm not yet sure about whether we need to do the benefit uplift, the £20 a week. What that would cost is £6 billion. And if we're thinking about the families, the poorest families, only half of universal credit claimants have children. So I think what we want is targeted generosity on the people who need it most. And I'm not sure that continuing that scheme is the way to do it, but we need to consider that. And we certainly need generosity.
Danny Kruger and Siobhan McDonald, I'm really sorry we're going to have to end it there, but thank you so, both of you, for joining us. Thank you.